anything that comes up in the chat. I'll be happy to see it. So we're going to talk about cloud storage and S3, which is a one way to make APIs that give you a way to access some place to put your data. We have well, we have a lot of options for cloud storage. Today, I decided to use Amazon S3 as the example. It's the oldest one. When I first learned REST, gosh, it would have been 2006 or 2005, like a long time ago. We were almost like, yeah, wow, time passes along there. But Amazon was one of the first to figure out how to sell APIs on the internet, like that you could sell access to your stuff through APIs. And S3 was it. Like S3 was their first AWS service. So it has a special place in my heart. It really is just a problem we've had since the beginning of the internet. How do we trade files with each other? How do we share data in files? And S3 decided to do it with REST, and that means now we have APIs. And what's nice about it is it's got a console, it's got a user interface, and it has all these extra features we're going to look at shortly. So really, the idea of cloud storage is how do we put the data that our programs need somewhere? And I have an example API I'm going to show you that might give an example of you needing to do that to solve that problem for your integrations. And if you got to save the data somewhere, you could, for us, especially in the meetup community, having an inexpensive place to put the data is a nice benefit. So you don't have to spend a lot of money on it. A lot of you can get S3 accounts. In fact, anybody with an email address can get some free credits and just do this completely for $0. My account is old, so it is not free anymore, but it is certainly very, very little money to have an S3 storage account. Now, it's also inexpensive to save the data on your laptop, right? Or to use a hard drive that you go get at Best Buy for $100. But that's not going to be that reliable. You only have one hard drive, whereas you have global, reliable, fast, secure data storage with this. If you let Amazon do it for you, and you have access to view the storage, and we're going to get to see all of that during this presentation. So let's take a look more specifically at the way Amazon does cloud storage. What I just told you is the same for Azure and Google, and DigitalOcean has some now. Everybody's got their cloud storage solution. We're going to do the Amazon one. So the way Amazon envisions cloud storage is contained in units called buckets. So if I want to store data in Amazon's cloud, I store it in something I create called a bucket. And a bucket has a name and a location. For your meetup, I used AP South 1. So Amazon has these things called regions, and the region for Mumbai is AP South 1. There is a region, I think, that's closer on the map to Surat called Hyderabad. I think that's right. I haven't been to India, so I'm not that aware of your geography. But that one wasn't available on my account when I was preparing, and I didn't take the time to make it. So we're going to use the Mumbai region today. And within the bucket, you store objects. So instead of files, they are called objects. So one piece of data inside a bucket is called an object. So if you're using an FTP server, it's like buckets are they're not exactly like folders, and I'll show you why. But inside the buckets, you put objects. Now, there's more to it. S3 has additional features that you're going to take advantage of. One of them is called versioning and locking. So you can turn on object locking and versioning, and that's better than FTP. If you use FTP to store files, you don't get versioning and you don't get locking for sure. Actually, FTP locking, it's even worse. It seems like it can do locking and it fails to do locking. So FTP is unreliable for that. Cloud storage does have that feature. And on Amazon, you can create object versions. And that means every time the object changes, all the history, like in Git, all the history is saved, right? And then locking means if I'm working on a file, maybe I'm in the middle of updating it and appending chunks to it or something, I can lock the file, and that makes no other party in my account able to change it while I'm working on it. So I can get concurrency controls, which is kind of nice. Another thing S3 will do is event notifications. So a way for you to have some other program wake up and do things when a file is uploaded or when a file is changed or deleted. You can have processes that trigger whenever that object is modified or changed or appears. So you can create, and those use other Amazon services that we're not gonna be able to cover today. But you hook it up to an Amazon service that allows you to subscribe to those events when things change in your bucket on the back end. And you could use Mule to do that, and that would be a cool talk. So if one of you wants to prepare a talk for Jitendra and Nitish about subscribing to events on Amazon with Mule, I bet you they like that. So you're invited. And then there's this really cool thing I learned about preparing this presentation for you guys called Lambda access points. So an Amazon Lambda is a serverless function that can just run any code you want on demand on Amazon's infrastructure. So it's kind of, you don't have to build your own Kubernetes and containers and stuff. You just put the code into the Lambda and Amazon takes care of running it for you. A Lambda access point can be a transformation in front of one of your files. So say you've got a CSV object in your S3 bucket and you want to get it out in JSON format. You can create a Lambda access point and it'll translate it for you whenever it's downloaded. Now, I like DataWeave better than Lambda access points. I'm very fond of using Mule for that job. So you can still use Mule for that job, and I encourage that. But if you wanted to do a native Amazon solution, you can build kind of like little transformers around your S3 objects with Lambda access points. And I do think that's a really cool feature and worth investigating. We are not going to use those in today's presentation, but I thought it was a pretty awesome feature. All right, so for you to set up your S3 service, you're going to pick a region in Amazon that you want your objects to live in, and it does replication if you want to do multi-regions for safety. We're going to just do a single region today because it saves me money. And you're going to create a bucket in that region. So for our example today, if you're going to do this yourself, you want to set up a bucket that doesn't use ACLs, and you want to, and the default is that it blocks public access. Buckets can be made available for public access, and that's nice if you want to put a download on your website for anonymous users or something. So you can make them public access, but it costs you money when people download your files. So for our presentation, for our example, you probably don't want any public access. And you can pick versioning or no versioning. Either way, this demo I'm going to do is going to work. So you can make one either way and play with versioning if you like to. Same thing with locking. You can enable or disable these features on your bucket, and versioning and locking are not going to affect my demo. So if you wanted to follow along and do it yourself, you can choose what you want for those features. All right, somehow Mule has to access your bucket. So in Amazon, the way you do identities is called IAM, Identity and Access Management. It's a different part of Amazon. So here I'm going to show you a little bit about what we just talked about. We're going to show the bucket and we're going to show IAM users. Mule is going to authenticate to Amazon using an IAM user. And when we set our IAM user up, you're not going to use, you don't need console access because Mule is not a person. So Mule doesn't need to use the AWS console. So instead of just staying in slides, you guys are, if you come to my talks, we like to do real stuff. So we're going to go actually look at Amazon. So we're going to start with IAM since I was just talking about that. And in IAM, so you log into aws.amazon.com and you go to the IAM service, and you can make users in Amazon IAM. That's the identities that access things. And as you can see, I already made one for this meetup, and I'll show you why. In fact, let me see if I need to save some of this for later. I do. So you create a user with the Add Users button, and this is going to be Surat user example. And you do not need to turn on access to the console for Mule, right? You just leave that unchecked, and you press next, and I like to use minimum security and then add the permissions I need. So I always just start out with a blank user that doesn't have any permissions to do anything. So I'm going to I'm going to create the user, and there it is. So there's the Surat user. Now it doesn't have any permissions yet, right? So, but that's the user that Mule's going to log in as. So in order for Mule to log in, it's going to need some kind of password. With Amazon, you set up security credentials right here. And the way we're going to do it with the connector is we're going to use access keys. So you're going to create an access key, and it asks you a bunch of security questions to make sure that you're doing it right. Mule is going to be an application running outside AWS because it's going to be on your laptop or it's going to be on Cloud Hub. So it's not in AWS. So you're going to choose that, and then it's going to approve and tell you that you know what you're doing. Good job. And you press next, and you put some description here. You create the access key. It's going to give you a secret right now, and that's the last time you're going to see the secret. So you need to save that and the access key as well. Now, I'm not going to save that because I just did that to show you guys how to do it. I'm just going to go delete the example account because I already made one with some additional steps taken care of that I'm going to show you. So you can make the user that way for IAM. And then we're going to go make our bucket. So you go to the menu, the S3 service, scalable storage in the cloud. S3 used to be SSS, but I don't remember what the third S is. So that's what S3 meant. So if somebody knows that trivia, you can put it in the chat. What does the 3 S's stand for? I don't know. After all these years. You go to your buckets. And I've already made one for this meetup. I'm going to go through the process with you, though. So you create a bucket. Simple. It's simple. So good job, Sandeep. If I had a voucher to give out, you'd get the voucher. So Surat S3 meetup example. There we go. And you can choose a region. And like I said, I didn't do my homework and get Hyderabad turned on, so, or any of these other Asia regions. So we're going to do, unless somebody knows there's a closer one to Surat, we're going to use Mumbai. Maybe that's the best region. I'll get some India geography lesson out of this. And again, I like to do everything with the minimum amount of security. So I'm not going to put any permissions. I'm going to leave it blocked. Yes, Mumbai is the best. Thanks, Nitish. So maybe I accidentally did the right one. And I'll do, we'll do leave bucket versioning disabled. And I'm not going to do, it would be a little bit more secure to use KMS, but that's outside the scope here. And I'm always curious, and I look at the advanced settings. We can leave the object locking off in this case too. Now, the Mule can take advantage of locking, so you might want to play with that. If you turn it on, it's okay. It won't mess my lesson up. I just don't have any locking in my demo I'm going to do. So you create the bucket, and I have to move the little share screen thing. We're going to create the bucket here. And there it goes. It made me a new bucket. So now I'm just going to delete my bucket because I already had one made for you guys. So that's how you go through the process of making a bucket. Now we're not done. We've done some configuration, and I could delete this later, I suppose. Sorry for the delay. There we go. Some configuration of the buckets and the authentication. Now we need to talk about authorization and policies. So in Amazon, I turned everything on with minimum security. Like nothing's allowed to do anything. The IAM user needs a policy and the bucket needs a policy, at least for this demo. Now, for you to make the connector work and make Mule function, you don't actually have to do the user policy. You can get away with just doing a bucket policy. So I'm going to show you how to do the bucket policy. That's necessary. We do need a bucket policy. But it's a better experience for development if we also make a user policy. There's a permission called list all my buckets, S3 : list all my buckets. And that's necessary for the Mule connector's test connection button to work, which is very satisfying for me. So I always use that one too. So I'm going to show you both of those IAM policies, how you set those up. So first we're going to go back to IAM. In Amazon, you can attach policies to IAM users, and you can also attach policies to S3 buckets. Each one can have a policy attached, and it knows how to compute the authorizations off of that. So we're going to go look at this Surat Meetup bucket I made previously, a little earlier today. And we're going to look at the bucket policy. So here's my bucket policy I created. When you make a policy, you can press this add permissions button and create an, wait, what am I doing? This is IAM. Yeah. So this is not my bucket policy. I said the wrong thing. This is my user policy. We'll do this one first. You can create an inline policy, and policies in Amazon are JSON documents. And they have a list of, they have an array of statements attached to them. So one policy can have many statements, and the statements have an effect and an action, and then they have, those can be wildcards, and the resource, which can also be wildcards. So in this case, we're permitting this IAM user, Surat Meetup, and in Amazon, these resources have universal identifiers called ARNs. And again, I don't remember what that stands for. I think it's, I don't know what the N is, but anyway, that's your ID for your IAM user. And this ARN is now going to have permission to all resources with the list all my buckets permission. And that's going to allow test connections to work. When you create your own inline policy, it gives you a nice editor. You don't always have to memorize all the JSON. You can kind of search for the policies in here, and it'll kind of walk you through finding which permissions are available, you know. So it's not too bad. You can work your way through it through the user interface, and this wasn't always true years ago. So anyway, I'm not going to save this one. I already did it, and it does have a JSON view. You can see the JSON it's building through the policy editor. So let me just go back. So that's in order to do the user policy. Now the necessary part is our bucket. So I'm back in Amazon S3 now. Our bucket needs to have a policy. So I'm going to go to permissions, and you'll see it has a bucket policy. You can edit these. And that one I kind of had to do myself. So we needed to give, what do I have two here? Oh, yeah, I needed to put two statements in here because I needed to grant permissions on the bucket itself. You notice the resource on line 12. In order to make the whole example work, we need some permissions to the bucket, and then we need other permissions to all the items in the bucket. So this is a very permissive policy, and we probably could make it more specific if we made very specific actions instead of using wildcards. So, but anyway, to do my example, if you put these two in there, you're going to be able to run all of the different inserts and lists, and we have a bunch of actions we're going to do, and I suppose I should show you what those are. So let's go look at the API that we're going to implement in front of this bucket. So this is the policy we had to attach. Go back to my bucket here. You're going to see a folder in here. So why is that there? All right, so what I did was I created a customer data API. Why don't we put this over here in Ramo? And the idea was I'm creating some kind of API that is going to host data on behalf of my customers. So my customer logs into my site, and my customer is going to have an avatar image, and they're going to upload some stuff to my website. And I want to keep each user's uploads separate from the other users. And I decided I want to keep all that stuff in S3. So what I did was you create new users by posting the user's name, and you list all the customers by listing the users. So let's go back to S3 and see how we might implement that, right? So what I decided to do was have now in Amazon, even directories are just magic buckets. So magic objects. It's an object with slashes in the name is all. So I decided to make a directory object for each one of my users. And whenever my API creates a new user, let's see if I've got this running. Yeah, this is running. The idea is we can post to the customer's endpoint, and I'm going to post Jitendra. So you're about to get your own bucket or your own object inside the bucket, your own directory kind of. So I'm going to post that. And now if you go back into S3, we'll refresh this. Is there a refresh button in here? Yeah, here we go. Now we've got a Jitendra folder. So you can kind of make different folders for your different users that way. So that's the design of the API is users are folders. And then a user is going to have a very special object called avatar. And then so let me go back to that. So there's a there's an avatar get that pulls down a binary avatar image, and you could return that to like a user interface or a mobile app or something. Or you could update the avatar by replacing the image here. And this endpoint would be really useful for Lambda access points, right? Because I could have it, I could have it resample the image down to the right resolution for the mobile phone or for the profile pic. I could have it store the image in large format and then return the image when you get it back in a small format. It's kind of cool. Or put a circle around it or whatever, right? Put a frame on it. Lambda access points do that. And so does Mule, but anyway. Then what I decided to do was have a way to list all the customer uploads and then get and put customer uploads. I want to show you the upload parts. So I'll go back to the avatar. In this case, I'm using multi-part form data in REST. So I think I probably made a slide for that. Yeah. It's a choice I made in my API that gives me a way for my REST endpoint to accept pure binary data. It doesn't have to get put into base 64 and put into XML or JSON. You could just upload a binary file directly inside a multi-part form data MIME type in your request. So that's what this looks like here. Use type file like that and max length of that. And then Mule can read that binary data and upload it directly to S3. So that's one way. It's not the only way, but it's one way you can do binary uploads in a REST API. So then let's see. So that's the API we're going to implement. Let's see. Let's go ahead and see how to do it in the Mule S3 connector. Now, in Mule, if I want to access my Amazon S3, you probably aren't surprised that there is an Amazon S3 connector, and you can just add it from any point exchange. And it has quite a few objects. This is a very mature connector. It's not premium, so you don't have to pay MuleSoft for it. It's not community, so it's well supported. It's available. Any of you can just go use it right now. And when you add the connector to your project, you're going to add a global element for your Amazon S3 configuration. And you're going to give the element a region endpoint. And if it doesn't match, you get this crazy error. So you have to have this match the region of your bucket. And then you're going to put your access key and your secret. And that secret will not work by the time the recording is posted. So I'm not worried about it. But if any of you want to quickly try to type that in, you could probably put stuff in my bucket. I won't be offended. And you then press test connection. And as long as you had that list all my buckets permission on your IAM user, that's going to work. And that way you don't have to actually make the connector work. You can easily check if your credentials are good. So I like that. I think it's a useful feature. So I go turn on the permission, at least long enough to get this wired up. So then we got to implement our flows. So I'll start with the one that I just used to make Jitendra a user folder. This flow is not very complex, right? It's got one operation in it, put object. That's all I had to do. What I did was I used the configuration. You have to give it a bucket name. You have to give it an object key. And if you want it to act like a folder in the console, you have to have a slash on the end. So I wanted Jitendra to get his own folder, so I had to put a slash on the end of the key. And I just put some placeholder content in there. When I'm making folders, they're not really folders, but when I'm making objects that act like folders, I don't care what content is in them because I'm not using the content. I'm just trying to make a path. So that's all it took. That was the entire flow to make that folder that you just saw work. And then if I want to list all the customers, so we could do that, right? Let's go back to our API and let's list the customers here. Why is it running? Why am I getting a not found? This is get/customers. It says API get not found on /customers. Maybe I can't have the trailing slash. I don't know. Yeah, can't have the trailing slash. it's going to go to S3 and list all the folders. Now let's look at how that worked, right? It had to go list all the folders in the customer. Remember, let's go back to S3 and look. My customers, quote unquote, are represented as folders inside another folder, right? So if I go to root of my bucket, the way I decided to model my bucket was with a customers folder at the beginning, and I could have other folders for other things. And then inside the customers folder, those are going to be my customer folders. I just made that up. You can organize your bucket however you want to. So then my Mule app has to know about that. So on my Mule app, my list objects is going to be listing all the objects with the prefix customers slash. Right. And that's all it had to do. And then what comes out of it, I'm down here in the metadata editor, is an array of objects, right? And those objects have a bunch of different properties on them. So I had to transform that in using DataWeave into my JSON response. And it always finds all the objects, folders and not folders. So the first thing I had to do was break the keys up into the folder segments. It was a little more than I expected. And then I had to get only the items that have two components, so customers and then customer name, so I wouldn't get all the uploads. And then all I did was take the last item of the path. So with S3, there's not really a such thing as folders. So you end up with just objects, lots of objects with different keys. And you have to do a little bit of logic to translate that into actual what seems in your mind like folders. But it does work, and that's how you get these different usernames like that. So that's the basics of how to use S3. I think we've done an upload. I could show you a real upload. So in this case, I think I showed you the multi-part form data. That's the next part. So remember, when I want to upload real data, I have to somehow get the binary from the REST API and then send that to S3 with a certain name, right? So I have a couple of things. I need to have the key, the path, and then I also need to be able to provide the binary data. So I need two things at least to do an upload. So what I did was I took the username, and that's from the URI parameters, right? So the username comes out of the path of the GET request, and then I have to set a content type. So in my case, I just took the content type that's inside the file upload. So if we go back to RAML, it doesn't say content type here in the RAML, but file uploads contain a content type header for them. So it'll know what the content type is. And then I have to take the contents. And I found to make it work, I had to force DataWeave to treat the contents as a binary type, because otherwise it would try to transform it and I got errors. So if you're going to make this, watch out for that. Like when you pull the form data out, you need to turn it into binary first. And then that's going to be set into the payload. So my first two were variables. And then I made my payload, I took the content out of the avatar image and I put it into the binary format in the payload. And now finally we're ready to upload. So I go to the put object. And again, you got to give it a key. And this one does not end in a slash, otherwise I'll get a folder, right? And I just called it avatar. And you put the payload in. And then I think I had to put, where did I put the content type? Oh, object metadata. So you scroll down and I had to put the content type in with the variable. Right, so that's all it took though. And then the results that came back, I didn't need to respond in my API with anything, so I just cleared out the payload at the end, so it didn't try to take this whole put response and give it back to my client. They didn't need that. So that's how you do. That's really the most, I guess, complex part of this entire connector is trying to do an actual upload. Downloads are easy. Lists are easy. I guess here's a get, right? And the get is very, very simple. There's nothing to it. You just give the path, and what you get out of a get is an object that has oh, that's a put. No, this is the get right here, and and that's what you needed. So I think with the get, I did a, how did I get the contents? Yeah, the payload is already the contents. The attributes have all the details. So I didn't have to do any transformation. It would just immediately download whatever was in the S3 bucket. So really, there's not much more to using the connector. Um, and I guess the other part I didn't include in my demo that I encourage you to do is to secure the access key and secret. You don't want to upload that into GitHub. So you can use Secure Properties Vault to encrypt it. Or if you're using Runtime Manager to deploy, you can let CloudHub hide those values and just set the settings through CloudHub, and that's another secure way to do it. But otherwise, I think I'm ready for Q&A. So what you got? What can I? Okay, what more can we add to that? Any questions?
Anybody?
Am I audible?
I hear you.
Okay. So, uh, yeah, I have a very small uh, question. So, we have lot many functions with S3. We don't have any move option.
I think that's true in the connector or even
Yeah,
S3 at all.
yeah. Like we can copy, we can delete, but we cannot move any file from one folder to another folder or one bucket.
It would be a rename because it's just keys, right?
Yeah,
So I don't know how you would do a rename. You're thinking I believe you. There's
because what I used to do, I used to copy from one folder to another, like, and then I used to validate, and then I used to delete the file. So this was in sync.
yeah, yeah, and you'd want to use a lock when you were doing that.
Yeah,
Probably you get a lock on the old one, copy it, check it,
yeah,
delete the old one. Yeah,
yeah,
that's a
yeah,
very long way around. But yeah, no, there's no. You're right. There's no rename and there's no move. That's unfortunate. I bet you it's the API. I wonder if the Amazon API does it. So the connector has to use S3 API, right? Whenever the connector doesn't do something that the API does do, you can wonder if there's one here. No, not that one. So there should be probably not move. It's probably going to be called rename. I don't see it here either. Get bucket. If there was something to like put object, but only put the metadata, maybe put object tagging. Copy or delete. That's it.
yeah. Like we
There's
tried a
nothing
lot.
here.
Yeah,
You've tried it. You've been there. Yeah, you have to do a 3-step.
yeah.
Yeah, that's not that's a little complaint more than question. I share your complaint.
Sure, thanks. So we have
Yeah.
a question from Safar. Yeah,
What are the use cases or scenarios where we can use Amazon S3 to store objects? Yeah, it's more powerful and than a file share or a file server, right? So some of the use cases that you get is you can have the data behind the scenes automatically replicated to different regions of the world. So that's a nice IT benefit, right? So now you've got cold storage and hot storage, and it'll do that. And then there's these additional. It basically opens up the possible. Not that you always need it, but it's possible now to put in to attach code to these files. So to have them anytime a file is changed, to have something go. So what's really nice to me is that triggering is cool. Like if anytime a user does an upload, I can have it run through recognition. So let's do a theoretical one. Let's say these avatar images. I don't want I don't want. I want safe content for kids. I don't want it to be anything that might not. I don't want R-rated stuff in my avatar images, right? How would I do that? Well, I could attach an event to these avatar images, and then route that through Amazon. On Amazon, it's simple notification service to recognition. I think it's called. I think that's the tool in Amazon that does it. Um, and recognition can tag the image with a safety moderation score, and we can require that in order for the image to be accepted, it'll be maybe if it's above a certain score, you quarantine it or something, and then somebody has to go check it out, right? So I can't do that on an FTP server, right? I can. So that's the kind of thing that S3 makes it possible to attach extra code to all of your file behaviors. That's my favorite reason to use it. So the two reasons really: IT, it's like industrial strength Amazon global IT that I get to keep my files in for a very low cost, so I don't have to make that with my own hard drives, right? And then number two is I love the event handling stuff.
Yeah, even like if you see slide share, they are also using the S3 in the background to store all the presentation.
Mm-hmm. SlideShare does that? That makes sense.
Yeah, I think they are keeping everything on S3. Like I'm not 100% sure, but I've seen somewhere in S3.
Yeah,
It's side
I can.
slide it's slide share or speaker deck. Out of these two,
Yeah,
I'm 100% sure it's a slide share only, I think. Yeah.
SlideShare. Yeah, I can promise you, I've seen it in the links MuleSoft. You go download Anypoint Studio from the website. That's an S3 link. So MuleSoft is using S3 to host our downloads that we need to get.
Yeah, it's not only MuleSoft. I've seen like lot of they are keeping all their tools on the S3 and they're giving like they're asking to download from there, So
Yeah,
that's a easy way. It's cheaper also, right? That's
way cheaper than trying to set up your own file servers.
yeah, but it
Yeah,
also recommended if you have some data which you are not using for 6, 7, it can be moved to the Glacier, right? AWS
yeah.
Glacier.
Oh, that's a good point too. Yeah, so S3 has a companion service called Glacier that's you can store a lot more data that you don't access very often for a much lower cost, right? But then when you access it, it has to cost money, and it's a delay to it. So this
But
is like a
again, like
backup.
in Glacier, again you can have a multiple bucket, hot bucket, like those kind of things, right? So
Yeah, that's true.
yeah, I
So
think
that's
it's
a
a
little special
it's
about
a
S3.
yeah, it's a good service basically. I think most of the people are using it like S3.
Yeah, I did a talk a few weeks ago for Azure. Azure has a competitor to this, and then for cloud storage, there's more. S3 was first, but now there's a bunch of competition. So DigitalOcean has a competition, and Google has a competition too. So
I think there's a data lake from the Azure side, right? Data lake
yeah,
instead of
data
Glacier, they
lake.
have a data lake,
Yeah,
and they also
yeah,
have some messaging services, right? So like they have a data grid, like they have a service bus. There are a lot of things they also have.
yeah, yeah. And moving data between them is always tricky. So I know a good tool for that called Mule.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah,
always does thing for us.
yeah. It's good. It's good to glue stuff together. That's for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Any overview for Cognos? I I don't know. Cognos is reporting, right? I got a question. Any overview for Cognos in AWS? Do you mean recognition? The one I showed earlier, Gopal? I only know Cognos as a reporting tool. Yeah, I don't think that's what we want. Make sure I'm trying to understand what you're asking, Gopal. Did you mean this one?
Cognos is IBM service, I think, right?
Yeah, Cognos is we got bought by IBM. Yeah. No, I'm gonna play with these. That my future meetups are probably. I've been playing around with content moderation and AI, so I might do one of those as an API that does that in a future one. But I don't know if that's what Gopal was asking about. I think he might have, because it kind of sounds the same. I don't know if that's what he was asking. You want to clarify, Gopal? Don't know. I'm gonna stop sharing.
think
Not sure I got
we
the
are
question.
good.
I have one point that is regarding the few operations on the S3 connector. Can I continue?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So there is a few operation like on object delete and on new object, which is using the SQS also. Can you add some points about it?
Well, I'm not using the object monitoring stuff. On new object, I believe he's using just the event notifications. I don't think it uses a queue.
No,
You
it's
can make,
required additional configuration to set up the queue. It is listening to the queue
oh, it
only.
does? Yeah, I
Yeah,
have
that
not
is
set
what.
it up. So,
Okay.
yeah. Oh, there it is. You're right. You have to set up a queue name for the notifications. Yeah, so Amazon SQS is how you normally do event notifications. I haven't done them in Mule yet. So that sounds like a next step. But yeah, the Amazon SQS is usually attached to SNS, isn't it? So let's see. Let's go do one. Why not play with it? So go back to S3. Let's take our Surat bucket and let's turn on the event notifications. So probably under management, lifecycle rules. So lifecycle rules is one way to fire off events, right? I bet that's not what's needed. I bet Mule does it for you. So if we just tried that, why don't we just try it? Why don't we have my application running? No, that's not right. Here we go. Let's make a flow that does on new object. And just for now, it just logs something. Right. So let's see what we got. We have an S3 object trigger response with a key. So we'll say, yeah, so notified for, and then add payload dot key default. I wonder why I think it wants that. There we go. So if we save that, it should redeploy. And let's see, hope it's possible that the connector does its own. I permitted it to do everything, right? I just had all actions on the bucket that were allowed. So it might do it by itself. Let's find out. Because I don't know if we have to turn on the life cycle rule or not. Right. Oh, it didn't like that. Bucket name. Oh, I didn't give it a bucket name. We better give it a bucket name. That's what happens with live demos. Surat Meetup 01. There we go. And I'll just do no folder. Do it at once for folder. The name of the folder in the bucket. There we go. No folder. Actually, this is a customer API, right? So what if now I'm going to leave it with no folder first. It's done building. I may need to stop and start it again because I broke a event source. Now what does it think is wrong? a different project. Let's close that. I thought I put a bucket name. There's a bucket name. Save. It might just be Anypoint Studio, not right? Let's see if it's Anypoint Studio out of sync. If any, I heard somebody unmute. If anybody knows, say something. If anybody saw me miss, you know, I have missed things in live demos before. It happens. No, it wouldn't even build. So build failure this time. It really doesn't think I have a bucket name. Let's see. Get through the API kit stuff. New object listener. It has a bucket name. Maybe I have 2 listeners. Aha. I had 2 of them. There it is. We had one of those empty flows. My students who were here from my class would laugh. We had that happen in class too. So that's fixed. So what had happened is I had another flow down here with the new object listener in it, and it didn't have a bucket name. I don't know if any of you have newer computers than mine and Mule starts faster. This one's about 4 years old. It's about time for a refresh. All right, we're starting up. And once it's started, we are going to make one here. So let me make this smaller. So we can kind of see the logs. It's still not started though. And I'm just going to upload something from my hard drive and we'll see what happens. Maybe I'll upload the slides for this presentation. All right, we're started. Let's see what happens. Oh, we got an error. User is not authorized to perform. You were right to change. We need a queue because no identity face policy. There it is. So we're not permitted to make a queue.
Yes. I think it will check if queue is present. It will not clear. Otherwise, it will create the queue. So that is what it is. Documentation says. Yeah.
It'll clear the queue, or it won't.
It will use the queue if queue is present. If it is not present, then it will create new one.
It'll make one with its. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So let's make. I don't think I want to make. Well, I could pre-create the queue. I think I want to see what it does if Mule does it all by itself. So I'm gonna allow Surat Meetup user to make queues. And I'm tempted to hit that all button. I don't know. Oh, I'll have to delete this user after the meetup. You all saw the secret key earlier too. Resources. All right, fine. Not good security hygiene here. You should all be. So this is delete me SQS policy. That way I remember. All right, so now my user has a new policy that needs to be deleted. And we're going to restart the application, I suppose. And hopefully when it starts, it'll go make a queue. We should probably go in SQS and see. So my account probably doesn't have any queues. I have AWS account for Integration Quest, which is like my learning company. So it doesn't use AWS except for this kind of stuff. So yeah, we have no queues yet. I don't like that. What is that trying to tell me? That's an old error. I don't know if on the recording you can fast forward these parts. I watch a one YouTube guy called Code Bullet. He does AI stuff, which I like, and he does his fast forward coding sessions in there. It's like he screen shares and then runs it in fast forward. Good move. Okay, initializing. I don't see the AWS connector yet. API kit did its thing. Starting. Oh, let's see what happened. We have a queue.
Okay.
Look at that. It made a queue. Okay, let's go see if it works. So let's go to S3 and upload a file. This is going in my next time I do this talk, by the way, now that you asked. Why don't we put the MuleSoft Certified Developer Level 2 data sheet in there? There we go. And upload. All right. Oh, look at that. I got a log message. Notify. There it is.
Yeah, this is
That's
good.
cool that
This
that
is
works.
quick.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
Mm.
That was really quick. Yeah.
Mm.
Thanks for that question. That was fun.
No, I just want to, because this is Mentioning documentation is straightforward, so okay, everybody should be aware about this. So you are taking a
I'm
session, it will be shared. So now it will be
Mhm.
a lot of people will come to know about this.
I am
Yeah.
very pleased with the connector, and I'm gonna go and exchange and give it 5 stars right now. It's a very good connector. So I encourage the rest of you to go do that too. This is a very high quality connector.
Yeah, I agree.
Most of the connectors are high quality.
Yeah.
Even
That's
you
true.
see
Even
even you see Salesforce of connector, there are a lot of operation in Salesforce connector.
Oh yeah, it is. That's true. Great connector. I don't know. We enjoyed it in the Surat Meetup, June 2023. There we go. We are memorialized. All right. I don't see any more questions. I think this was a successful session.
yeah, that's true.
Really a
Had
great
fun with it.
session, like yeah, right. Session. I like people got to know about like more about the S3 and even some of the AWS capabilities also. So thanks for that. It was really an awesome session. Like yeah, and
Yes, I
for
agree.
this
It's a
Surat
really good
MuleSoft
session.
Meetup.
Yeah.
Yeah, guys, and
Yeah,
Yeah,
if
I
we are
want to give a
anybody,
looking
special
for more
special.
stuff from you, Ryan.
Yeah. Yeah, say that again. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was saying we are looking for more sessions from you.
Maybe we'll do the content moderation stuff, the recognition. I found it on Azure, and I found it on all 3 of the clouds. So we could do that someday. The problem is in a meetup, then I have to have unsafe content to test it with. So I don't know if we're going to do that. We'll have to find out. But maybe that'll be a fun one. And I invite you guys to do your own sessions. I think I've learned a lot in my career just by preparing sessions that like this. You learn more when you try to make a session for other people. So I invite you guys to my meetup in Oklahoma City, US.
yeah,
I need speakers.
yeah. If you see, I have done all the speaker.
Wow. Well, you're invited to mine to do number 101.
It can be more than 100, but I don't remember. But I have done like almost near to 100. Yeah,
I want to give a
sure,
special shout
definitely.
out. I'm going through the guest list. Hello to the guests. Some of my students from class this week are here. I saw Srini. I saw Rob, but I think he disconnected. Sampath, hello. Um, yeah. So I think that's